Hello and welcome to our Build Along webinar today, presented by Cities Digital. My name is Kyle Knebel. I'm a software trainer here, and our Build Along session will be to show how to configure the Laserfiche import agent. And our Build Along is just an interactive experience designed to guide you, the viewer, through the creation and deployment of a common business process, in this case, import agent. During our session, you might want to pose a question, or you might have some assistance needed. Go ahead and post that in the chat box in your meeting window there. Our moderator will take those questions and hopefully answer them immediately or pass them on to me during our webinar. Some tips for success: go ahead and take good notes. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Complete the survey afterwards. We do appreciate your feedback, so please fill that out if you can. And this session will be recorded and posted later. And if you want to have an individual training session with somebody here at Cities Digital, those can be arranged with our consulting department. Today's process is configuring import agent. And the intended audience for this webinar is Laserfiche admins, advanced users, and what we'll need access to is the Laserfiche import agent configuration utility, the Laserfiche client, and the administration console at certain times. So our agenda here is to take a look at import agent, and there's three examples I'm going to show today. One is a straightforward file import for just a general Laserfiche import agent configuration to import files. We'll also take a look at a list file, which is an interesting capability in the import agent utility. And then also we'll take a look at the email archiver portion of the Laserfiche import agent utility as well. And we'll do a build along with all three if you like. We'll show you some examples and then how it processes through. So what is import agent? Import agent is an application that is going to automatically import files into a Laserfiche repository from a Windows folder. Or it could be the email archiver, which is going to pull emails from a designated email folder within a particular email account. And we can also do list file imports as well. So let's go ahead and take a look. We'll get started with a live demo right now. Okay, so we have our Laserfiche import agent utility on screen. We also have our email archive configuration as well. And typically what import agent is going to do is it's going to watch a folder that's either on a computer locally or on a network share within Windows. And those files that show up in that folder will get imported into Laserfiche. Laserfiche import agent, you can think of it as maybe middleware. It just stands in between the two and brings documents through into the repository from another location. So let's go ahead and launch that import agent configuration. Just before we do, though, I just want to point out that I'm using a folder here on the desktop called import agent source files. And we have, if we take a look, we have a few TIFF images and PDFs that will come in. All right, so we'll just make sure that we have that in our back of our head, and we know that. We also have our Laserfiche clients so that we can see that once they are imported, they show up in the repository. And then also I have a what they call an LSTX or list file sample that has a few documents that it has listed in here, and we're going to use that in a different example to pull those in as well. So import agent configuration utility. Now this utility is only going to be normally on maybe a server or a single workstation. It's not on everybody's workstation. It's usually in one place because it's usually licensed on a per seat basis. So there's one import agent, or you might buy a second license, but you can launch import agent from that server. You may get a screen that pops up asking you to confirm that you want to allow that to run. And I'll bring that over because it launched on my other window. Let's go ahead and bring up the configuration utility. And you can see that I already have one profile, as they call it, created. But let's take a look at something here first. In the profile option here, we have some, or profile dropdown, we have some options. And these are general options for the import agent. We can set our session count to start at any number. That is a token that we can use to name documents or apply as metadata for various purposes. And it's just a simple number counter, sequential, that can be added to various points in the configuration of your profile. Down below in the middle, we have the Laserfiche Distributed Computing Cluster, or DCC for short, and that is a server-based OCR engine. Now, Import Agent itself does have a built-in OCR engine, but if you wanted to forego using the local OCR engine within Import Agent and push the OCR process to a server, in this case the DCC, you could do that as well. We're not going to do that here today. Down below and in the third position is the OCR settings. We normally leave our language set at English. We don't decolonize text unless we are typically scanning newspaper articles or pages that have multiple columns in those pages. Typical pages and papers that are being imported, we don't need to decolonize the text. If you want to, you can perform image enhancement. And if you click on the configure button, it gives you temporary image enhancements to generate better OCR results. This does not modify the documents being imported. So you can set up deskewing, you can do despeckle to reduce little dots, you can automatically rotate the image, and even do horizontal or vertical line removal. And that's your general settings. Up above, there's a file types option. Out of the box, Laserfiche Import Agent can import the typical image files that you might see in a system, and those are listed up above in the main box here. But if you want to add to those, we can, and we can add text files as well to search for those. And then finally down below in our example for list files, we'll take a look at that, but Laserfiche can import files with either the .lst, the .xml, or .lstx, or even .lfv extensions for briefcases in order to do bulk imports. And we'll take a look at that as well. Under advanced settings, we also have file monitoring options and new files options. And these default settings are usually good enough, 10 seconds and 30 seconds. However, sometimes you might need to adjust them upwards. Sometimes you have documents that are being dropped into a folder and they're locked for a longer period of time than the default value here. So you might need to raise this number to kind of wait for those documents to become unlocked. And that way you can get those documents ingested more rapidly. Anyway, some default settings there under our profile options settings. All right, let's go ahead and build a profile. And when we do that, we just click on our Create New Profile icon. Now, if you already have a pre-built profile, you can copy the settings from an existing profile. Now, in this case, we're going to step through everything, so I want to start with a new profile. So we'll click OK. And the first thing it's going to ask you is what's the server name and the repository. And I'm going to type in my server name here. Sometimes if you hit the drop-down, your Laserfiche server will show up in that drop-down, I would hope normally. Go ahead and make sure that's in there, and then choose your repository that you'll be using and set the authentication method that this profile will be using. In my case, I'm going to use Windows Authentication, but sometimes it's going to be the Laserfiche username and password. That could be an admin account, could be a full user. As long as that account will have access to the repository when it needs to put documents in there, that is the account you want to use. So sometimes using a service account like the admin account would not be best practice because it may not always be available. But go ahead and punch that in there, click OK, and then you'll have your profile builder wizard pop up. And it's going to give us a chance to name the profile. We'll call this Build Along. We want to monitor a folder, and like I mentioned before, on my desktop I do have a folder called Import Agent Source Files. We'll click OK. And then you can also check the box to retrieve files from subfolders. I normally, because I only want to pull files from this folder, I would uncheck this box. Down below, we also have a filter option. So we can say, hey, any document that comes into this folder I want to pull in. Or I can say only the file extensions who match one of these filters is what I want to bring in. So in this case, I'm going to set it as TIFF because I actually have both PDF and TIFF images available to me. All right, so we'll go ahead and click OK if we want to finish up. However, before you do that, go ahead and step through the rest. We're going to step through all the different tabs here on the right-hand side. We'll click on Properties next, and it does reflect our sign-in information that we had previously entered. Then we want to set up within the Laserfiche repository where it is going and what it will be named. And the file name will come from either the document that you're pulling and from that document name. Sometimes those names are not unique or they're very unique and don't make sense in English. So you can use some tokens. And tokens just mean information that is dynamically created to name the document. And in this case, we have quite a few. We have our global date and time or users information. For the file itself, we could grab the file name or the extension of the file name, the creation date and modification date of the Windows files. So this really relates to Windows files, their Windows file name, their Windows extension, the Windows creation date, and Windows modification date. The entry, as it goes into Laserfiche, has some properties. It could have as it's created in Laserfiche, it does have an entry ID, so we could actually pull that as a token. Also, its parent folder might have a field value or parent name or even its parent ID. The counts, remember we have our profile count, our session count, which was that globally unique number that we'd set in our options. And we also have a repository counter. So there's different number counters that we can use as tokens. You can even use $sign and $sign to name your documents as well. The folder, we're going to designate a specific folder in the repository in which our imported documents are going to show up. In my case, here I have designated a folder called Import Agent within my repository. You can designate any folder you want, but we'll go ahead and designate that folder. And I do want to make sure that if the following folder is not found, that I can use a different folder. If it's not found, then the import agent will throw an error and not import documents. So kind of a neat thing to know, but we can do that. And then we do want to designate a volume. We want to make sure that we are always pointing to a specific volume. I don't recommend using the parent folder's default volume because that's not always set in those cases and may result in documents not being filed as well. So I always designate my volume. Profile count token is here, so we can set that to any number we want, like I mentioned. And that token down here is available, as I mentioned, up here in the count tokens up above. All right, next up is our fields tab. Our fields, we can assign a template. Now this is going to be, for example, a generic setting. Import agent doesn't know exactly everything about each and every document being imported. So we might want to apply this template to every document, but we won't know its specific category or date or any of these fields that we want to apply. So if we do apply a field value, this is going to be applied to every single document imported. So if you have different documents that need different metadata, then we would probably leave these blank. Although setting a template might be a good first start. All right, just choose that. You can apply individual fields if you want, and if you didn't want to apply a template, we can say no template assigned and simply click on the add remove fields, and we can choose to put an abstract or whatever fields you want on this document. I'm going to hit the abstract field there, and we'll type in a value. Put in our date. Go ahead and click OK. Now, I just finished up, but I actually didn't want to. So let's go ahead and open up that profile again. I'll double-click on the line item. And we were in the Fields tab. We can apply a template or not. Go ahead and click on Tags. If you want to, you can apply either security or information tags. That's perfectly advisable. And as long as the account doing the importing has access to that the security tag, then this will work. The account needs to have access to that tag in order to apply it. All right, next up is the really important stuff, this schedule. Now you can set the import agent to import documents continuously, and it'll look, for every 10 seconds or 30 seconds after a document is created, and pull those documents in. You can also set schedules. And let's take a look at how you do that, because it's a little interesting. We'll go ahead and click Add. So for example, if we wanted to add schedules for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at midnight to 6 a.m. every one of those days, we'll go ahead and click the Add button. You get a little pop-up, and we add the monitored time. So we're going to do Monday from midnight to 6 a.m. All right, so we give our option there. Click OK. Now, do we want to do Tuesday at midnight to 6 a.m.? Yes. Go ahead and click Add. And again, that's going to ask us to change that and set up a different day for our settings. And as you can see, you just set up your different daily schedules. It does allow for a lot of flexibility, but it is also not something that is going to be super easy, especially if you have multiple different schedules. Down below, we do have the ability to disable the profile altogether so that it's not going to run at certain times, and then we can re-enable it whenever we want. All right, so I'm going to set continuously for our testing purposes here. For processing, this is our processing options for every document that comes through. And we can choose to generate text from our TIFF images or any other document type if it does have text catalogs that can be read off the system. As we can see, for regular options, we can generate text and use OCR if no text is available. And we can even configure profile-specific OCR settings in this case. Now, we did set our settings in the options for OCR, so we might just leave those in place. And those might just be good enough and not anything we need to set. You could, if you wanted to, if you knew you were getting certain documents into this folder that you're monitoring that has just kind of difficult to process OCR image pages, then we can set a different profile for here. Text files, if we are importing text files, which we're not in this case, we can set a text page every 60 lines, which is the typical one. And for PDF files, Laserfiche can process PDFs. And the neat thing is, just like the Laserfiche client, the Windows client that is, we can generate image pages from those PDFs. So we could check that box. And we could drop the PDF file if we wanted to. You could leave the PDF on there, and then you'd have both image pages and the PDF, kind of a dual document, if you were to call it that. But in this case, maybe we want to convert the PDFs to TIFF images. And by unchecking the Keep Original PDF Files option, that will basically drop the PDF and leave us just with those image pages. Now, we can also preserve PDF annotations on the Laserfiche pages from the PDFs. It captures most PDF annotations. And then we also could turn the image into a black and white image. This is missing a word. It should say import as monochrome images. But basically, it will convert color images to black and white. However, if you have photos, then this is not recommended because it makes those photos look very poor at best. So I usually don't import monochrome images on PDFs. Also, we can set the DPI. We can change the resolution up or down depending on the original source settings and set it for our own particular desired DPI. All right, so that's our processing options. Go ahead and go to post-processing. And for the documents being monitored, in that monitored folder, we can either delete them or move them to a subfolder. In this case, I've designated a folder called Processed from that monitored folder. Now, if you're monitoring subfolders as well, we can group them by subfolder within the Processed folder. So within the Processed folder, we'd have our different subfolders under there if those were being monitored. You can check the box for deleting unmodified files after a certain amount of time. And this will also apply to list files or LSTX files, XML files as well. For files that fail to import, it will put them in the IA error folder within the monitored folder if anything goes wrong. And then subfolders will go into that folder as well. For the monitored subfolders, you do have an option to delete empty subfolders. Those may or may not be something you want to delete. I usually uncheck this. And then for my list files, I will do post-processing for the files referenced in list files. Meaning I'm going to put them in the processed folder or not. If I don't check this, this may cause the files to be reprocessed again when this runs afterwards. So it just depends on what's going on with the original files. If they're still in a location that have not been moved to the processed subfolder, then it may reprocess everything. But we'll leave that checked for now. And then finally, Laserfiche repository document handling. What happens to these documents when they come into Laserfiche? This is what we're going to designate here. So for image and text files, if it comes in with a name that already exists in the repository, we can let Laserfiche create a new document name. Usually this just means that it's going to put that (2) or (3) around the end of the name as it comes in the same folder. Or we can update the existing document by either appending those pages, prepending, or replacing all the pages. This might be neat in the case of you pulling in a monthly report and you want to keep adding the reports every month, and at the end of the year you'll have 12 months worth of reporting information in one file. So, appending the pages to an existing document, because it always comes in with the same file name, would be a great way to do that. For electronic files, we can create or replace. And for the metadata, so the template and field information that we are setting up, we might want to just keep the existing document's metadata, or we're going to replace with what we've set up here in the Fields tab, or we can do a merge. And we can merge the metadata from those different fields. And if the metadata conflicts, we can use the existing document metadata or the new document's metadata. So if there's field values that are blank on the existing document and they're being filled in by the new metadata, great, no problem. If that field already is populated in the existing document, which field takes precedence, the existing metadata or the new metadata? So that's our choice here under metadata. And then for version control on some documents, maybe we're importing Word documents, we might want to automatically put the document under version control. Version control actually does work on Laserfiche image documents as well. If you are changing metadata, then version control can show you what has changed over time. But we really normally think of version control with electronic documents like PDF, Word, PowerPoint, etc. All right, and that's your document handling settings. Once that's all set, go ahead and click OK, and you'll see that you have your profile listed in the import agent configuration utility. I'm going to do something here, and I'm going to add a new column. I'm going to click on View and choose Columns, and I'm going to add the parent folder. Let's go ahead and add that to our list. I'm going to move that up and next to the monitored folder. And that way I can now see that here's my monitored Windows folder and then the Laserfiche target folder in the repository. Pretty cool. All right, so we're configured right now. And what we'll do is we'll take our source files, and I'm going to select them all and move them out to my desktop. All right, there's all my documents. And I'm going to now bring them into my source files folder so that those documents are recognized by the import utility. And the service will go ahead and process those documents. As we can see, the files are being imported as we watch. They are being dropped into the process folder here so that we can see what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and log into our repository. Go ahead and go to the import agent folder, and now you can see that there's all the documents, and they should all have at least one piece of metadata on there. There's that abstract field on there, as we saw. So that was your import agent utility working. So that's an example of, I'm going to delete these here, by the way. So import agent profile where it's monitoring a folder. Now, the purposes are various. You could be monitoring a folder in which a photocopier is scanning scans into that folder. You could be dropping imported documents into this folder. Maybe you've got a scan bureau who provides you a drive full of documents and you want to import all those documents into Laserfiche. You can drop those documents into the import agent monitored folder and they'll be imported into Laserfiche. And speaking of bulk imports, there's another way to do that. You might get if you send your documents out for scanning by a scan bureau, they might provide you with a file full of documents plus an index file or a list file. And that list file might contain information about every single one of those documents. For example, I'll go ahead and open this document up here, and the file itself might reference, a location where the file is. It might even have a field value or metadata or template assigned to each of those documents as well. This is a XML file, for example, but this list file or LSTX file would be something that would have all the information about the numerous documents being imported. And so Laserfiche Import Agent can process these types of documents as well. And I'm going to go ahead and set that up and give you a quick example of that. Go ahead and I'm going to take the image example LST or list file. I'm going to get a copy of that and we'll drop it in to our monitored folder. So Import Agent will now use this to grab all the files and apply the metadata to that set of files. And then once it's done, this list file will be moved to the processed subfolder like we just saw here. So that moved everything there. And if we go look at our repository, we can see that there is, and remember I deleted all the others. So here's sample 1 and sample 2. They've been assigned a template, and they also have the date assigned in that one field with that template. So that's how we can do scanning bureau type work with lots of documents, just kind of automatically sets those up. So that's really neat as long as the list file follows the proper conventions for configuration. All right, so that was Import Agent. Let's take a look at Laserfiche's email archive. It's a great little tool that comes along with Import Agent 10.4.1. 10.4.0 did not have it. They released it in 10.4.1. And it allows us to pull emails or attachments from an email inbox into a Laserfiche repository. Now, not everybody's going to have this, and this is really, we're going to do a build along, but in this case, it's fairly infrequent that you see this. So I'm going to open up this profile and just walk through what we see here so that we can get a nice idea of what's available in the email archiver. First off, what we'll do is we'll give it a profile name, and I've named it, in this case, the IMAP email archiver. Now, you could use SMTP or IMAP. SMTP is an older mail transfer protocol. IMAP is a more well, it's been around for years, but it's a more powerful and easier to use email protocol for accessing repositories. Choose IMAP if you can. The mail server, we're going to type in the mail server URL. So we need to type in whatever that is, server.domain.com or whatever it may be. That's going to be your email server URL. There is a normal port 993 for IMAP. That's the IMAP port. SMTP uses a different port. You can choose Secure Socket Layer or SSL for securing the communication between the email archiver and the server. And then we're going to definitely want to have the username and password of the account associated with the mailbox that the email archive will be monitoring. All right. Now, if you're going to use a shared mailbox alias, which is optional, you do need to make sure that the username is entered in the format above with domain name, username, and the shared mailbox name. All right. Once you've got that set up, go ahead and test the connection. Make sure that you are talking to the email server. If this is not validating, then go no further and make sure that that is configured before you proceed. Once that's tested and configured and validated to be successful, you can set up your message retrieval polling interval. And you can even change the status to red. Now, this doesn't mean that the mail will be not retrieved again. Okay, if you leave it in here and just mark it as red, then those emails will be retrieved again. So that's why what we want to do is make sure under post-processing that we want to designate our monitored email folder. Could be the inbox. Well, probably not. We'll probably designate a specific email box. And then we will probably want to move those messages to a subfolder within the monitored email box folder. So let's say we're monitoring a folder in your email box called contracts. And what those will do is those will get moved to the IA processed subfolder under the contracts folder. And the same goes for error messages. You could choose to permanently delete the messages from your mail server once they're archived, which means they'll never get reprocessed. But if you need to make sure that they are moved somewhere and you're not immediately deleting them, go ahead and mark the folder locations. And these are defaults, IA processed and error. I sometimes change that to, well, I did change it to IA error. Normally it just says processed, your choice. You can change the repository login information here so that you're connecting to your repository and over the network, and Windows authentication is available or just regular Laserfiche authentication. All right, so that is the monitoring and targeting. So for archived messages, let's go ahead and take a look at the properties of the documents that we can do. So we can take the email subject and use that as the name of the document going into the Laserfiche repository. You can also use tokens. As we can see, we've got our globally available tokens, file tokens, entry information, email. Now on an email, this is going to be great because you can use the properties from the email to name the document if you want, or even configure folder paths, whatever you want. So this is really a great tool. In this case, our folder path, I'm going to leave the subject line as our name of our document. Our folder path is imported mails, and then I'm going to use the received date and time, or received date, but I'm going to reformat the date so that it is a very unique folder. Every day I should have a group of documents, emails in this received folder. All right. Again, the volume, go ahead and designate a folder, a volume. I just don't want to take the chance, so I do that. For text settings, we can generate text from those emails. So we're going to retrieve the text of the emails. It's built in, so it's really fast, no problem. If you want to generate text files, we can generate pages every 16 lines. Now, for emails, we have quite a bit of flexibility here. With your attachments, for those emails that do have an attachment, we can do several different processes. We could separate the document and discard the email. so we could keep the attachment, which is a great source, or keep the document, the attached document or documents in the email message itself. We could separate the documents and maybe even save the only attachments with a certain extension. Or we want to do both, keep the documents in the same documents and the same email, but also as separate documents as well. And my favorite is separate the email attachments and discard the mail message. Maybe we only expect documents to come into this folder with attachments. Maybe we're expecting faxes from our eFax server, and those show up here, and we'll pull the fax out of the email, and who cares what the email is? It just really depends. However, you can keep information from those attachments. We can also generate pages for those that are PDFs, drop the PDF if we want, and we can do error handling as well. So if we want to, and we get errors on metadata because the length of the information on one field is too long for what Laserfiche expects, we can say, hey, ignore the message and still import the document. And if it exists in that folder already with the same document name, you can tell it to either add it as a new version or create the new document and rename it with a parentheses 2 around the, or whatever parentheses number it is, around that document name. Okay, so some great options there for our email messages itself. For templates and fields, this is going to be fairly straightforward. I would recommend building a template that matches your email information. In fact, I've done so here. I've got a template called Outlook Emails out of all my other templates, and it has all the fields available to me from our email tokens. And that would be the sender name, the sender address, conversation ID, unique message ID, sender's BCC, recipients, information, all that. With those fields in my template, I can then go and choose the email template that's appropriate, so BCC emails. So the BCC would be a name, BCC addresses would be the actual email address. Subject, let's go ahead and grab that for sure from our email, right there. And I probably want to capture the recipient email for sure. Recipient's names. And I'm also capturing the date, I think, in here somewhere. Time sent, email time sent. Very good. Time received, that's probably a good one to capture. Let's go receive time. That includes the date and time, by the way. And then our priority, if we want to grab that as well. Click OK. That then sets it up. Now, let's open it back up. And there are tags. You can apply information tags or security tags to your emails as well. And that's it for your email archiver settings as well. So I hope you learned a lot of info here. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. All right, so again, that was our demo. Additional resources include the Laserfiche Answers Forum, the Laserfiche Solutions Exchange on laserfiche.com, and the Laserfiche Support site. You can get there two ways. You can do laserfiche.com/support or support.laserfiche.com. It is free for many items. However, you can create a free account to get videos and additional product information from the support site. So it's a really great tool there. So I want to thank you again for your attendance. And again, my name is Kyle Knebel, software trainer here at Cities Digital. And we want to wish you a great paperless day.